there is a lot of talk generally politically of building a federal front to oppose the BJP. Uh, we do not see a similar push, sir. I'm not saying that efforts are not being made, like you said, but there's very little talk of building a front of, say, non-BJP state governments to actually champion issues of fiscal federalism. This is one area where India has had a very rich legacy in the past.
Sir, I'll say three things. One, it's above my pay grade to worry about the national election and national politics and all that. I'm a second time MLA, first time minister. The second, I have very high confidence that of the variables within our power today, of course, the union government tries to dilute them every second of every hour of every day. But still, at the pace that they execute, by the grace of God, they are not 1/100th as competent at administration and execution as they are in politics. So they cannot strip us of all our powers. So as far as my eye can see for the next 4 years of our term, I have headroom of things we can improve in the government, in the Tamil Nadu system, in our administration, in our finances, in our model, and in our kind of interaction with the world and investment attraction. So I think there are a lot of variables in our control that will improve our lives. And I'm kind of focused on that. I'll go a slightly different way. I'll say to the extent that I never expected my leader, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, to have this kind of national attention in this little time. It was not his stated intent that he wanted to be a national player. He is the first time Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. He inherited a broken kind of system, deeply in debt with huge revenue deficits, 60,000 crores the previous year. And with the administration, in my opinion, decayed through a lack of political leadership for the last 5 years. I don't think anybody would argue with that. So he did what was his job. I did what was my job. Forget him. I'm surprised at how much of a national kind of image I have. I mean, the fact that the two of you feel like it's worth talking to me itself tells you something, because we are not aiming to be the national dialogue. We are not aiming to shape the national dialogue. We are doing our jobs. We are doing our jobs with probably two things profoundly different from the union government, in my kind of thinking of this. One, compassion. We are looking to be compassionate, to be progressive, to protect the bottom, to keep harmony, to avoid bigotry and othering and hatred. And of course, that Chief Minister does most of that. And two, competence. The only two things I can say that we are fundamentally different. We have our values and they are profoundly compassionate and kind of social justice oriented. And we seem to be good at doing our jobs, relatively. This has elevated me, let alone my Chief Minister, to a status that neither of us asked for, expected, and really get that much, kind of benefit from. We are doing our jobs. But it tells you what the state of the country is, right? That's the only thing I would leave you with.
So that actually cues me up to what I was going to ask you, because I was reading your comments recently, and you talk about that how Tamil Nadu hasn't been impacted. I know the Chief Minister was part of the opposition letter which they wrote to the Prime Minister about the communal violence that we've witnessed lately. But you said something interesting. You said that Tamil Nadu stays buffered by this because of the fact that in Tamil Nadu you have democratized religion. I wanted you to explain to all of us outside what exactly you meant by that.
Yeah, I'll give you one. I'll give you the theory and I'll give you the ultimate case study of it. Right? Which would you like first, the theory first or the case study?
Whatever you want, sir.
Okay. Why don't we start with the case study? The case study is the Sabarimala temple, which is not even in Tamil Nadu. It's because of the way the Kerala-Tamil Nadu division happened. It's just across the border in Kerala. The Sabarimala temple was a small hill temple which hardly attracted maybe 3,000 or 5,000 people a year prior to 1950-51. There was an incident which is, a high sensitive incident, so I don't want to go into it. But the consequence of that incident is that the temple was burned to the ground, the idol was damaged, and it was basically, in need of rebuilding from the ground up. There's a lot of story why, but I won't get into that. But the net result of the need for refurbishment was that the people in charge of the temple came and met my grandfather in Madurai. My grandfather was then the former chief minister of the erstwhile Madras presidency. He had done a lot of work for temples. Our ancestral lands are in the Kambam Valley, close to where the temple is. We had some historic connectivity with those families, the Pandalam family and so forth. So they asked my grandfather to donate a new idol for the temple. My grandfather and his friends had 2 or 3 identical idols made in Swami Malai in Kumbakonam. And my grandfather personally took it around the state of Tamil Nadu, I think some other places, maybe Sri Lanka and all that. He took it around to popularize to create a following, right? Now, no less than the Honorable Union Finance Minister told me some of the anecdotes related to that. When I was in Delhi recently, she reminded me, or she told me, I didn't know of it, that when my grandfather brought the idol to Madurai temple, there's a way of consecrating a man-made idol into a deified one that you can put in a temple, right? So part of that ceremony, he was taking it around. He brought it to the Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple, which we have a long history with. My ancestors built part of it. And in that temple, the kind of more traditional people said that the idol should not be allowed in the temple because the Ellai Sami, it's outside the border idol, God, and should not be involved into the temple. And it went so far as some people stopped praying at the temple, saying that the temple had been defiled because this God had been brought into the temple for the ceremony. I didn't know that. Honorable Union Finance Minister told me also. But after that, everything got sorted and all that. But anyway, the net result is that before 1951-52, this basically did not exist. Today, less than 70 years later, or around 70 years later, the single biggest following where crores and crores of people go, many of them multiple times a year, in any temple south of Tirupati is Sabarimalai. So in a culture and a land where you have temples that are hundreds and 1,000 plus years, some 1,500 years old, brilliant architecture, gorgeous, scale, massive, exemplary of the style. How is it that the most frequented temple is one where one human being carried it around and put it there, and now it has got crores of people going? So it tells you that the norms of a society, the mores of a society are as much about community building and as much about creating that camaraderie, that kind of engagement, as it is about anything else. This is the case study. Now I tell you the theory. The theory is starting in the 1920s after multiple attempts, including many generations of my family. My great-granduncle was one of the founders of the Justice Party. Crusaded for the nationalization of the kings and empire's old temples. It was passed once. The governor refused to sign it under Dayaki in 1921. It was passed the second time. It went into law. The Hindu Religious Endowments Board was created. And step by step, once the state got control, all governments, including Rajaji, the Swatantra, the Congress governments, all governments continuously democratized the Saivite practices and the temple practice in Tamil Nadu. In what way? When my grandfather was HRE minister, first of all, the government taking it over means that everybody has to be treated equal. There's no inside or outside. It's well preserved. The government takes responsibility. There is no kind of cabal. There's no cartel. Second, when my grandfather was minister, he said any caste can be a trustee. You don't have to be only a Brahmin or an upper caste. Step by step, it got changed. When my granduncle Bhaktachalam was minister, he said the archanas can be said in Tamil. Right? When Talavar Kalaignar became chief minister, he said one of the trustees must be an Adi Dravidar and one of the trustees must be a woman. Then we came step by step. Now we say priests can be any caste. And you can have women, Odwars and so forth. And this chief minister has done that. So who did the Dalit Temple Entry Act? It was Rajaji. Rajaji of the Congress and the Swatantra Party. When they came to power after the Justice Party's reign was over, rather than reverse the nationalization of temples, they went the other way and said, we legalize and formalize that Dalits can go all the way into the inner sanctum, into the sanctum sanctorum. So we have step by step democratized. What is the result of that? If I walk out now and go down the street, in the next 10 streets, I'll find 50 temples. in every corner, at every T junction, there's all these beliefs. Everybody in people's houses, I have temples in my house, right? Everybody is free to build temples, to follow in their own way, to have their own community, their own, priests, their own rituals. Some 30,000 temples that used to be belonging to the kings and had cultural value are nationalized by the government and run under the HRNC. Now you ask me, is the HRNC an exemplary department? Absolutely not. It is as rotten or more rotten than any other department. It needs correcting. Completely agree. But that is true of all departments, right? That's true of medicine, that's true of education, that's true of health. That's true. So if we nationalize because you have a corrupt or an inefficient administration, then we shouldn't run government at all. That's just not for Tamil Nadu. I'm saying in any state, anywhere in the country, that can't be the basis of privatization. So my point is, we democratized it in terms of access. Why is it so important that the Archana should be said in Tamil? That means we can understand what the priest is communicating to God on our behalf. You see, it's so important. So, we have all these step by step expanding the tent and making the practice inclusive and not discriminatory. So it's very hard to do othering here, is my view.
So in that context, I want you to explain to me, how is that different from what we saw with the entire movement about the Ayodhya temple recently? I mean, how do you see that? How would you contrast that? And the kind of communal history and, the polls that happened. How would you?
Well, the less I say about the temple, the better, because it reflects, in my opinion, not well on us as a country, on the judicial system, on the kind of irrationality in successive orders, in the amount of scams that have been run in terms of raising funds. Let me put it another way. That is not what I am a practicing Hindu or Saivite to my understanding of the religion. What happened there, in my mind, is not the highest example of what should have happened in our way of life.